Good day. It's not often been discussed, but Joe Biden's first important foreign policy move is not one of sharpening confrontation with Russia. It is one, on the contrary, of seeking a cooperation from Russia. I refer specifically to the Biden administration's urgent signals to Russia that the United States is seeking a 5-year extension of the Strategic Arms Treaty, the so-called START Treaty, that was negotiated by Barack Obama when Biden was Barack Obama's vice president. In fact, this is an entirely sensible and appropriate move because, as far too few people, I think, are aware, the strategic military balance over the last few years, since the middle period of the Biden administration, has actually been tilting significantly against the United States. The reasons for this go back to certain decisions that were taken by the George W. Bush administration and by Obama himself. Firstly, as is well known, George W. Bush pulled out of the Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty and took moves to extend NATO eastward, offering NATO membership, or at least making long-term offers of NATO membership to Ukraine and Georgia in a way that deeply antagonized and offended the Russians. In addition, George W. Bush hatched plans to site anti-ballistic missile interceptors in Europe. Barack Obama came along and appeared to promise the Russians a reversal of these policies. Instead, he pursued them even more aggressively, so that the United States, whilst Obama was president, backed the change of power in Ukraine, which took place in 2014 through violent means, and which the Russians, correctly in my opinion, construe as a coup ultimately directed against themselves. And of course, Obama reversed the policy that he had signaled he would take to the Russians. He'd given them to understand that George W. Bush's plan of siting anti-ballistic missile interceptors in Eastern Europe would be dropped, but instead he proceeded with it. In addition, it has now become increasingly clear that the facilities developed in order to launch these anti-ballistic missile interceptors in Eastern Europe, the so-called Aegis onshore batteries, are capable in it also of launching intermediate range cruise missiles against Russia. The problems were taken even further in the last months of Donald Trump's presidency, when the United States also withdrew from the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Agreement negotiated by Presidents Gorbachev and Reagan in the 1980s. This appeared to outlaw the deployment on the European mainland of intermediate nuclear missiles, intermediate range nuclear missiles, something that the Russians were extremely sensitive about. But now it turns out that the United States has given itself a free hand to deploy them by cancelling that particular treaty. Now, the Russians have been watching and following all these steps, and they have responded, and they've been responding in military technological terms extremely aggressively. Firstly, they have developed a range of new, very powerful hypersonic missiles, the most important of which is the so-called avant-garde glide vehicle, which can be launched from Russia and can reach the United States, and which the United States anti-ballistic missile systems are incapable of intercepting. In addition, the Russians have developed various other hypersonic weapons, especially hypersonic weapons that have anti-ship capabilities, like the Zircon cruise missile, but which could also, in theory, be used to attack the continental United States, and would have the range to do so if launched from submarines in the Atlantic. But there have been certain other steps that the Russians have been taking, which I think must be causing concern in the United States even more. Firstly, the Russians have stepped forward development of their own anti-ballistic missile systems. These include the A250 anti-ballistic missile system, which is an evolution of a anti-ballistic missile system first developed by Russia in the 1960s and 1970s. But even more concerning, I think, for the United States is the S-500 Prometheus system, which apparently can be deployed quickly on mobile launchers and which is capable of intercepting cruise missiles and intermediate range missiles launched from continental Europe. But the most alarming weapons of all are probably certain new nuclear-powered weapon systems, a nuclear-powered cruise missile, which the Russians are developing, which can reach the United States from Russia itself, and which is subsonic and apparently stealthy and difficult to track, and even more worrying, the Poseidon nuclear-powered underwater drone, which comes with a gigantic nuclear warhead, allegedly of 100 megatons, and which would devastate the coastal cities of the United States if it was launched against them. There have been some extremely alarming reports that the Russians intend to deploy these cruise missiles in an autonomous mode in the Atlantic and Pacific, and that they will be stationed and operating in the deep ocean for 2 or 3 months at a time, ready to attack the United States at any time when they receive the signal from Moscow. This is, of course, a deeply alarming development, both for the United States and for everybody around the world who is worried about these things. The other great problem the United States has is that as the Russians have been stepping up their own technological and weapons developments, other powers with which the United States is in an adversarial relationship have been doing the same. China has now also developed its own hypersonic glide vehicles, which are primarily, it seems, of a tactical nature and are intended to attack the US Pacific Fleet. However, the Chinese are now also deploying road mobile intercontinental ballistic missiles and are apparently upgrading their own land-based intercontinental ballistic missiles with multiple independent re-entry warheads. Then the United States also faces a growing challenge from what one might call the micro superpower, which is North Korea. North Korea has now demonstrated capabilities to launch missiles against the United States itself. It has apparently developed nuclear warheads. It has displayed recently a large liquid-propelled intercontinental ballistic missile with apparently a miniaturized but powerful hydrogen weapon warhead in a recent military parade. It has also displayed solid-fueled sea-launched ballistic missile that it is apparently also developing, and there are reports that North Korea is taking its first steps to develop a nuclear-powered submarine capability, presumably in order to be able to deploy and possibly launch this sea-launched ballistic missile. So whereas during the Cold War, the United States only had the Soviet Union to worry about as an important strategic adversary, today it also has to worry about China and North Korea as well. And one must also consider the possibility that other states, also antagonistic to the United States, such as possibly Iran, might start to develop their own capabilities, their own nuclear weapons capabilities also. Given this deteriorating picture, and I would say also very alarming and concerning picture, it becomes an urgent priority to come to some agreement with the Russians and hopefully ultimately with other powers to try to bring these very disturbing and very frightening developments to a stop. In addition, Joe Biden and his administration now have an exceptionally ambitious program for restructuring the United States itself. They're talking about a $2 trillion reflation package within the United States. The Federal Reserve Board in the United States is printing money or creating money through its quantitative easing programs in order to cover the cost of the various crises, pandemic crises, the economic crisis that the United States already faces. And it seems to me that the United States can ill afford an out of control arms race with the Russians and the Chinese and the North Koreans simultaneously at this time. So, coming to some kind of agreement with the Russians is an absolutely urgent priority. I anticipate that this will, in fact, be the Biden administration's major focus in its relations with Russia. I think the people who are the power brokers within the Biden administration may be people with neo-globalist, exceptionalist perspectives of US foreign policy. But I think that they're also just about realistic enough to understand that the situation for the United States is becoming increasingly alarming and concerning, and that they need to try and negotiate some kind of geostrategic ceasefire with Russia. That, of course, remains to be seen whether they can achieve it. The level of trust towards the United States in Russia has collapsed to almost exceptionally low levels. Moreover, there is such a head of steam against Russia, both in the United States and in the West, especially amongst people who would normally be counted as Biden's supporters, that one has to worry whether Joe Biden is going to find it any easier to forge ahead with at least a more stable relationship with Russia than Donald Trump, who had similar ideas, in the end could. So we will see. We will see. It is possible that Joe Biden will be thrown off course if he really wants to go down this route, just as Donald Trump was. And it could very well turn out that things will continue to go from bad to worse in relations with the Russians as the strategic challenges for the United States continue to grow. I devoutly hope it is otherwise, and that the analysis that I have set out in this program is the correct one. The United States does not need more wars, certainly not more interventionist wars, whether in the Middle East or anywhere else. It absolutely, imperatively needs an end to this growing arms race with Russia, China, North Korea, and all the others. It should not want or seek, especially with all its other problems, to take on all of these powers simultaneously and at once. Beyond that, the development of some of these weapons, which I've been talking about, especially the nuclear powered cruise missile and the nuclear powered drone, is extremely alarming and destabilizing and must fill one with worry and concern. I think far too little attention is being given to this issue, which, in my opinion, is far more dangerous than all the claims that are made about climate change and all the rest. So I hope that this analysis is right, and I hope that this is the policy which the Biden administration follows. Time will tell. Thank you for joining me on this program. Please join me in my next program. Please also check out our main channel at the Duran, where I appear with my friend and colleague, Alex Christoforou. Please also check out Alex's own channel. You will find links under this video. Please also come to our shop and buy the great things you will find there, the amazing t-shirts, the hats, the hoodies, the sweatshirts, and the amazing magic mugs. Please also look us up on our other platforms, BitChute, Rumble, Odyssey, Library, and the rest. And please remember to subscribe to this channel and to our other channels, and to support us through Subscribestar, PayPal, and Patreon. Thank you very much, and please join me in my next broadcast.